I said we're going to review what we have in the Makbili in the appendix. You're welcome to open this also if you want. How the Makbili's index and appendix is different from that of the Koran. Koran had to take an even-handed view about, well, is it okay to go to the Temple Mount nowadays? Should we be encouraging it? And it's funny, like I mentioned, they end with the Lubavitcher Rebbe's idea. You should tell people just study the halachas. That will bring real progress. And we said no, that's I think exact opposite of what real progress would be. Either way, then I said if I were to, let's say, want to write a book about all these subjects, I wanted to talk to people about, let's say, another mitzvah yisoma that came back, tcheles, right? Big mitzvah, right? Everybody wears tcheles. Who doesn't wear tcheles nowadays? It's a mitzvah. So I wouldn't start with the whole idea of are you supposed to, or is this really tcheles? You know where I'd start? I'd start with the line of the Torah saying this is a mitzvah. Now let's go about doing it. And then tell how do you go about doing it? Here's how you tie it. Where do you get the stuff? So here's where you find it. Go to a store and get it. And only bring up if there's a controversy afterwards. Because the Torah is first there to know how to do it. First do it. So too, if I were writing a book about temple-related issues, I would begin with the basic commandment to build the temple. And then the commandments to have the sacrifices. And then go into how to build the temple. And all the various laws of how to run the temple, right? That'd be the good way to go about it. And then there wouldn't be room, ultimately, for asking questions. Well, are we supposed to be doing this? Of course we're supposed to be doing this. That's how he started. And here's how you go about doing it. Usually had about dikduk things. If I had to tell someone, here is how you're supposed to pronounce the last or the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, they'll start talking, well, I don't do that. Are you sure? And I have a tshuva. Maybe it's already, this is considered living tradition, so I'm not supposed to change my tradition. Things Achronim discussed. Instead of doing that, I show people what it says in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch about how you're supposed to say Kriyas Shema. How you're supposed to make sure you know all the strong forms and weak forms of each letter, right? And the basic thing that the halacha requires. Then the last questions. Then we get around to these kashas. Wait a minute, are the sixth letter and the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet pronounced the same way? Is a samich the same way as a sof? There must be a contradiction here. Then bring that up, and then realize, it must be there's something wrong here. If you start with the Achronim discussing, is this even allowed? You've already lost. Correct? That's what happened here. There was a guy. I started showing him, because he could handle it, he knows dikduk, why it is we're not going to pronounce a cholim like it's a kametz yud. There was another guy who started the wrong direction. He came in and said, my Rebbe said it's pronounced ay, and that's it. And that's our tradition. So we lost him. You know who wrote the book about the temple as I described? Anybody know? 50-point question. Who wrote the book the way I described you should go about doing it? The Rambam. That's the way the Rambam did it. So in the Rambam's world, you can't ask the Rambam, hey Rambam, who says you're allowed to go to the Temple Mount? He didn't have a question. To him it was an obvious thing. And those who study like the Rambam, like these Mughrabi rabbis, it never was a question. It's not allowed to be a question. Your job is to go there and pray. Your job is to organize yourselves into a nation and rebuild the temple. That's what the Rambam said. That's how we understood it. And asking these questions and trying to present it in this, backwards, starting from the end and giving credence to an unfortunate status quo is wrong. And it's going to mislead you. It even might make you get to the conclusion that whatever we do, we must preserve that as we see it right now. And right now there is no temple. Right now there is no sacrificial service. Somehow or other, we must maintain this status quo. And by the way, there's some who approach that explicitly. They say in the Chazon Ish's biography that when the whole issue of electricity came up and using it on Shabbos for various things, there was obvious room for heterim of certain sorts. But the Chazon Ish was against it. He says you got to find a way to osir it. Right? The Chazon Ish's argument, using anything electrical is what? Creating a circuit, and that's boning on Shabbos. Is that the way most of anybody ever held? As a matter of fact, no. It was a very disagreeable thing, but he was doing this because he was trying to give an argument that would completely prohibit the use of electricity because he felt that using electricity on Shabbos would destroy Shabbos. Okay. Everybody has their own viewpoints. Just saying we shouldn't go about doing it. Here in the Koran, they, the Makbili version, they go a step farther than in the Makbili they go farther than the Quran. Why? Because they actually give you a more updated version of this. For example, they point out that modern day scholars have tried to encourage people to keep the various commandments. They have, for example, Rabbi Ariel's list over here of all the mitzvahs that one could potentially fulfill, at least in his opinion, just by visiting the Temple Mount. And that's, by the way, a good answer to the whole thing. Are you holy enough to do this? Remember, we said last week that's not an argument. When a Jew wants to do something, nadava, share nadav libo. What are you supposed to do? Encourage them to do it. Do not say, "Well, you're not holy enough for this." How do you know you're holy enough? They said it about speaking Hebrew. They said it about living in the land of Israel. They say it about all sorts of mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are given to you, and you can keep them, and they're open for you, and that's how you get close to God. So he has his commandments over here. Although I believe that this whole idea that they have mishum kibush, going and occupying the Temple Mount and being there and showing Jewish presence, this is asserting ourselves. It's not so much a kibush if you then let the police chase you out of there. Stomping around even in the Dome of the Rock for 5 minutes in the between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. Sunday through Thursday only, and then allowing yourself to be chased away and not having the right to go or the choice to go sometime else is not an act of kibush. It's just a demonstration, and it's a demonstration of weakness. Right? Yeah. It's like saying, I own the house. A person who owns the house, a chazaka to a house or a field, how does he show his chazaka? He is there when he wants to be there. If the person is actually machzik, by the way, that doesn't mean he's the possessor. Remember, chazaka of a field, if this fellow, it was his ancestral field, and now someone else is machzik, that chazaka alone doesn't give him the field. He has to somehow show why it is he came into possession of the field. Otherwise, his claim means nothing against that person who has the ancestral claim, right? I think it's in Bava Basra, right? It's in other places. So exactly. That's the ancestral claim. So too, if you have someone else who's machzik there, and he's letting you in on a temporary basis, and he's dictating where you're allowed to walk and what time you're allowed to be there and what you're allowed to do, you are certainly not showing you have a chazaka there. The one who's dictating is demonstrating a chazaka, and a powerful one at that also. So I don't believe that one accomplishes this type of mitzvah by going to the Temple Mount. He does connect to God, and he does more mikdash, but kibush or whatever it is they want to say, asserting ourselves, they're not doing that. However, going to the Temple Mount and doing something that they prohibit, and the more Jews do it, and showing that they're not going to follow along with it, that would be it. So, for example, for many years it was prayer. Now prayer is allowed. Thank God they pushed that envelope. And then it was prostration, which has made a comeback. But many of us suffered persecution for prostrating ourselves. Many of us were attacked by the police for doing so, like that guy over there. Many of us were stopped and threatened with arrest for prostrating ourselves, or just bringing an Israeli flag. I don't believe an Israeli flag is holy. For better or for worse, that's the flag of our country right now. I fly the flag, and they told us on certain days you can't fly the flag. You know that? So flying the flag or just holding the flag, that is a good demonstration. Yeah, in Shar Shem, yeah, it's a big problem. Yeah. Maybe I would. Yeah, if there were enough of us, I would go. And I know people try to go, that they have Rikud Galim and things like that. I'm all for that. Do I do it personally? I used to walk through Shar Shem all the time. I would with the yarmulke and tzitzis and stuff. Everybody does. Yeah, okay. So maybe we should. We have to have a big demonstration. But I think instead of trying to just pick a fight, that's more like a pick a fight. You know why? Because if a single Jew goes and does that, the unfortunate situation is they might attack him with violence. So what you first need before you do that is perhaps two things. One of two things. I would appreciate both of them. One of them is enough Jews who are armed so that their enemies are intimidated. And even better, just remove the enemies from that place. They should not be there. And then you get both. There should be armed Jews all over the place because it's their right and that's their protection. And they should remove all those who, for no other good reason except for blind hatred of Israel, they need to go. Anybody who is an anti-Semite, who hates the Jewish people, does not belong here. Fact. And they make it very clear who they are. So they do not belong. And it's our job to rid ourselves of them. Just forget that. It's like, what do you try to accomplish by keeping around those people who are trying to kill you and who say it outright and how much they hate you? I was always surprised by Jews who visit Eastern Europe or Germany. Didn't the Europeans make it very clear to us now, 2 generations ago now, they don't want us there? It's their country, and you're told not to be there. God tells you not to be there. Why would you go back there? My grandfather never went back to Hungary after the war, right? Why should he go there? But that also teaches us that why should those who hate us be here? This is our country. They shouldn't be here. Let them go. Yeah, I'm all for that. That's why, some reason I don't know. Too many Orthodox Jews believe for some reason that even though this is where we are supposed to be, and there are people who hate us and want to kill us, we should just keep them around indefinitely. I don't care. There's a big world. God gave the whole world. Let them go somewhere else. Everybody could go place. People go on vacation. Yeah, where? Ireland. They're their best friend apparently now. We talked about this earlier today. The northern part of the world, the northern stretch of Europe, of Asia, Siberia. So it's full of natural resources and is a great place, but mostly empty, and they could go there. Yeah, and also Alaska and northern Canada are just full of untouched wilderness and natural beauty. Also, well, yeah, okay, fine. So let them go. Not my problem. The difference, by the way, someone said, wouldn't you just be as bad as what the Germans and other countries did to the Jews? The difference is the Germans were delusional. The Jews that they were trying to persecute at the time were not threats to them. They were loyal citizens of their country. And the countries that the Jews wanted to go to could only stand to benefit by letting in those Jews. Does that make sense? What? No, it's not being like the British, because the British had everything to gain by letting the Jews go to wherever the Jews want. If the British had took the Jews into England, that would have benefited them. And if the British had let the Jews go to any British colony or protectorate or mandate, that would have benefited that country, because Jews are a benefit. I know, but that's nonsense, because Jews don't do things like that. But there's facts. It doesn't matter what people say. There's facts. You let Jews into a place, they'll create a neighborhood that's crime free and is a socioeconomic boost to your country. Yes, that's what they did. They were over there. They were they were bombing their enemies. Okay, the British, because the British were causing the death of Jews. No, that's not true. That's what I'm trying to say. The British. Do you have any relatives who were harmed by the British mandatory immigration policy? Well, I do. Right? So I'm surprised that you're unaware of the history of this. The British were doing that which was anti-Semitic. The British could have let Jews go to Palestine. The British could have let the Jews go to Australia or any place that was part of His Majesty's empire at the time. They could have let the Jews go wherever they want, but the British prevented that, and they are to be held accountable. Okay, the Chazal talk about this, mentioned in Theale, that at the time of the destruction of the first temple, there were those who were actively harming the Jews, and there were those who were standing by and letting it happen. And God holds, and the sages hold them both accountable for what happened. The British could have done good things for the Jews, but they chose not to. They allowed it to happen. And to a certain extent, the Roosevelt administration. And nowadays, if there is a sovereign country that doesn't want to take in Amalekites to their country, they have very good reason to do so, because those Amalekites are murderous and will destabilize their country and for the most part do not stand to help them economically or socially. So that's the difference. Jews help you, others do not. And until you understand that basic fact, it was like the fool who said that he didn't like the idea of Jews carrying guns, right? Some sort of relaxation on the gun control in New York City. Why? He lived in Brooklyn, very Jewish Brooklyn, and he says if a lot of Brooklyn Jews are carrying firearms, let's say pistols, like they do here in Israel, haven't you seen Avenue J parking arguments on Erev Shabbos? What if it comes to, they start taking out their guns and shooting at each other? And the answer is, even if Jews are arguing over a parking spot on Avenue J once on an Erev Shabbos, that's where all the stores are, on Avenue J, near Yeshiva Flatbush. Even if that is the case, you are dealing with Jews. So you can imagine some other cultural, ethnic group somewhere else in Brooklyn where, yes, they are armed and those people tend to be shooting at each other. They have inter community violence, which is true. But Jews don't do that because Jews don't do that. Why don't Jews do that? Because they have a proclivity to kindness and compassion and they're bashful. Jews are different. And that's why Jews create nice neighborhoods where there is no violent crime to speak of. Yeah, I guess that's the
Rabbi,
problem. Yes, please.
to what you were saying about the British, I think it's a bit of a mischaracterization to say that they stood by and let everything
Oh
in
no, they're
Germany
active. They're actively
happen.
helping.
They actively did that. They
Yeah,
actively banned.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. There was too many countries just let Hitler do what he's doing. The British also supplied arms and tactical help to those who wanted to hurt the Jews. It's kind of funny. Nazi Germany, one of the worst things Nazi Germany did to its own war effort was first chase out its really smart Jews, like Einstein, persecute them, and then and Oppenheimer and the rest of them, right? Made Nazi Germany uncomfortable for the biggest geniuses of the time, who helped the United States create their weaponry that won the war. And Nazi Germany then was basically destroying the greatest output that they could have had. And they started wasting all their materials and resources on trying to destroy the Jews. That was what they wanted to do more than winning the war. And the British also, they didn't want to take in Jews. Jews couldn't help. They could have even recruited many Jews to fight in the war effort. And they need soldiers. They need know-how. I think one of the major differences, why is it that all the brains that developed nuclear weapons, where were they? In the United States. The British could have easily had those brains had they been smarter beforehand. Had they had a little bit of, had those Brits had a little bit of brains beforehand, they could have brain drained the Jews. But they didn't. You know, maybe the UK could have been the first nuclear power, right? But no, they couldn't. They didn't have it. Yeah, the Brits. Yeah, officially the country is no longer called Great Britain. Just the islands are called, and now it's called the United Kingdom. It's not just England; it's the UK. Yes, that's what it's been called. Yeah, they make historical mistakes. It's kind of funny because of anti-Semitism, which has its basis in this week's parsha, by the way. Anti-Semitism means that Gentile nations and societies, kingdoms, will harm themselves always when they want to harm the Jews. It's not neutral. Mikalelcha aor means if they decide to do anything against us, just cursing us, not taking action against us or being passive against us, whatever it might be. Those who curse us are harming themselves. They're putting themselves on the wrong side of God's good graces. Okay, you know that the Nazi Germany had this idea of Jewish science. They're not going to pursue anything that's Jewish science because that's what the Jews do. So, whose major theories and the consequences thereof did they outright reject? Einstein's. They said good riddance to Einstein and all the nonsense, that Jewish stuff. So they didn't pursue anything that could have been derived or reached from starting with Einsteinian understanding of physics. That was a major drawback. So that's it. They're not going to. Their research of weapons was basically rocketry, vengeance weapons, and how well did that help them? Eventually, they didn't have the V weapons that they're trying to develop. They never ended up fully developing them. Yes, they did have some pretty big, smart guys, German scientists, who developed rocketry, the way to deliver the warheads, but they never got to be nuclear at that point. They ruined themselves because they just said, yeah, the type of things that an Einstein says, even though it's not Torah, it's true. They just reject it outright because a Jew said it. Okay, it's a problem. There are people today nowadays. That's the funny thing. You hear about anti-Semites. They just say the United States is doing Israel's bidding. One, what is exactly is Israel's bidding? My bidding. All the Jewish people. We're up to some sort of sinister thing, and the United States is doing that. One, they don't know exactly what it is. Two, it's also patently false that no one here is telling the U.S. administration what to do. They just do what they do. But either way, to them, it's the most sinister thing in the world. These people tend to be the biggest fools in the world. They're haters, and they don't succeed in anything they do. So there you go. I don't know. Back to what Makbili has here. So Makbili is basically doesn't hide the ball here. Doesn't hide. He's trying to encourage people to go to Harbayis. He even has the map that's become quite famous of the area that seems to be quite clearly what the Theale is. And it so happens to be that whole entire raised platform. According to Rabbi Koren's research, the way he understands it, the Theale isn't exactly rectangular or square around the areas of the Azarot, which were rectangular. It's actually bulged on a certain side, and that was also, you can see it today. People always ask about this one. You can still see the change in heights on the Temple Mount, and that seems to indicate and where the temple stood and preclude ideas that have been put forward even as recently as the late 20th century about where exactly the temple stood and where the Mizbeach stood. Okay, so it's kind of good. They actually show you where to go. They also have much more pictures and diagrams indicating this. So it's a better read. And then they have, this is a good one, Hadracha Ma'asit Lo'olim Lahar Bayit, practical guidance for those going to Har Bayis, which is a must read, and it even tells you what to do. So you understand where their sympathies lie, and they even have full color pictures they took with Google Earth and Google Maps and all these things how you can go see that. So they do it right. However, I still don't think they went far enough because the Rambam would still disagree with the way they've presented this matter. They should have just said Hadracha Ma'asit for going to Har Bayis. If you've read this book until this, what is this book? This is Rambam's Sifrei Avoda, Korbanos, and Tara. And you knew this, if you're getting now to the appendix, you don't need to start asking this question, well, what should we do? The only thing that's left to do is the Hadracha Ma'asit for today. Like the Rambam would say, this is almost a joke. So they basically put in this picture and encourage people. That's all they had to do. So I think, interestingly enough, I have here the smaller Makbili version. Now, in the second half, it's basically they divide into two books. Avodah was divided into two of these smaller books. So this whole appendix is not in this volume. But in this volume, they have a similar appendix, but it's been slightly changed. How is it changed? Look over here. This is amazing. I wonder why it is exactly they did this. On this page, where does it correspond to? Because they did in a smaller font. So, here. On page 1207, in this version, it has the Hochota Topographiot, the topographical proofs to exactly where everything is. You can see it on that page down there. And then they have some Ha'arot, which means, simple points to be made at the end, footnotes there. You turn the page, you get to Hadracha Ma'asit for going to Har Bayis, and you have where it says Klali on this page, how to go. A Zav and a Bal Carrier are not allowed on Har Bayis. There's a sticker someone put over here. See this version? I tried to peel it off. And I didn't want to ruin it. So, as far as I could tell, what Makbili originally put here, the first two lines where it says practical guidance for going to the Temple Mount and the Zav and the Bal Carrier are not allowed on Temple Mount. Instead, we have a sticker put in here. I don't know who put this here, but I'll read you what the sticker says. Get this. Moshe, you want to see this also. Hamamar Don Baharabayit Uvaliyalav Al Pishi Tata Rambam. This article discusses the Temple Mount and the ascension thereof according to Maimonides' method. Harabbanut Rashit Yisrael V'od Rabim Migdolei Hador, the chief rabbinate of Israel and other rabbis, greats of our generation, Osarim Aliyah Lahar Bayit Mimatzav HaKayam, prohibit ascending the Temple Mount in the current state. Shinui Matzav Veheter Aliyah Bisman Hazeh, change in the status quo apparently, and the permission to ascend nowadays, Natun b'machloket aposkim, is actually subject to dispute of the decisors. Ve'ein b'divrei ma'amar v'alchot lahalan, okay, and considering the words following in this article, and the words that and the halachas that follow. Kedei lachriya b'machloket hadorot hazo. There is nothing here that can actually, decide this great controversy. Okay, it says machloket hadorot hazo. This generational controversy. Now I do not know who put this in, but he put in quotation marks, and it's a different font. So I wonder, was this an act of vandalism? Because someone who's reading this right here, it sounds like he already mentioned a few pages ago that the rabbinate is against such a thing, and other great poskim are already against it. He already gave the other side. It's almost as though he didn't want someone to be reading this line up here, that the headline, Hadracha Ma'asit, practical guidance for how to go to the Har HaBayis. I think that this was not put in by Makbili. Maybe it was, I don't know. Or maybe someone pressured him. It looks more like an act of vandalism. Someone printed these stickers, and these aren't easily removable. They'll destroy the page. Okay? Someone printed these stickers and stuck them right over here into these printings. Has such a thing happened before? What was that? You have a question?
Which page is that on again?
Well, in the small version, it's 313.
Yeah, okay. I don't have that in my small version.
Show
I
me
think
yours. Up to the camera.
it's an act of vandalism.
So I have this sticker stuck in here. Like I said, I wonder, someone was aware that it says right on the top of 313 what it says here, and they printed this and they glued it in quite well. Well, I didn't do it. Why would I do a thing like that? I don't even know how to print stickers. The printer we have here doesn't have all those fancy settings. No. Okay. You know what I'm talking about? You have a way to print stickers. Whenever I need to print anything, I just go. I have a guy here who does it for me. But yeah, that's what someone did. I did not do this. It's a really good act of trolling, I think. So I have to see other versions.
You need to put another sticker on top.
What?
You need to put another sticker on top.
What was supposed to be there. So I guess that's a fitting conclusion to this.